Fly rods. There's a lot of options out there. It seems to be one of the biggest mysteries of the fly fishing world when it comes to new fly fishermen is how do I choose a fly rod? So let's take a little bit of time and talk about fly rods. What do all the numbers mean and kind of demystify one of those mysteries of fly fishing. So these are all my fly rods. I have a lot of fly rods. I fly fish for a lot of species in a lot of places. They all have their place. You don't need this many fly rods unless you really, really love fly fishing. But when it comes to choosing that first rod, or choosing any rod for that matter, there's a lot of numbers and a lot of sizes and a lot of things that can intimidate people and confuse them. So I'll try to break it down for you in as simple as I can. Basically, fly rods are broken down by what's called a weight. So you'll see 3 weight, 6 weight, 8 weight, 10 weight. All that means is the stiffness of the rod. So it's a number scale. Lower numbers are more flimsy, higher numbers are stiffer. Lower number rods are better suited for smaller fish, casting smaller flies, and then the heavier number rods are better suited to cast bigger flies, fighting bigger fish. So that's kind of that breakdown. And then with fly fishing, it's not the rod that throws the fly, it's the line that throws the fly. So you have to think of it like that. It's an intermediate step. And so you'll want to match the weight of the line to the weight of the rod. So usually if you buy a 5 weight rod, you're going to buy a 5 weight line, or an 8 weight rod, you'll get an 8 weight line. That's kind of the numbering system of how it works. And then you'll see an 8 weight -2 or an 8 weight -4. All that means is how many pieces after the dash. So if it's a -2, it's a 2-piece rod, breaks down in half. If it's a -4, it's a 4-piece rod, so it breaks down into 4 different pieces. I personally like 4-piece rods the most because they're easier to pack and travel with. I can put them in my backpack, I can put them in a checked bag, carry them on a plane, and it's no problem. So usually I will go for a 4-piece rod. Even now, sometimes you'll see single-piece rods. If you're a lot of fly guys, a lot of guys who always keep their rod rigged, ready to go, like the feel that comes from a single weight rod. So that's kind of a breakdown of the numbering system. If it's a lightweight, flimsy, it's a low number. If it's a stiffer, bigger, heavier rod, it's a higher number. So which ones do you need? Well, that's up to you. It matters what you're fishing for and where you're fishing. So in general, if you're fishing for, let's say, small trout, panfish, smaller waters, you're gonna go for a 4 weight and under. For a lot of that kind of all-around rod, you're looking at that 5 and 6 and 7 weight. And that's good for trout, it's good for bass, smaller bass flies. It's good for most panfish and different size things. And then when you start getting into this bigger trout, over 20 inches, salmon, saltwater fish, then you're getting into your 8s to 10 weights, and then the big saltwater fish like tarpon, and bigger fish like that, you're getting in the 10 weights and up. So for me, if I could only choose 3s on my top 3 fly rod choices, I would start with my 7-foot 4 weight. This is an Orbis Superfine. This is a 7-foot 4 weight rod. This little rod is what I will choose to fish for small native trout on mountain streams. A 7-foot rod is nice and flimsy. It's short, so I can maneuver it in those rhododendron covered small streams and still be able to fight a small fish well. I like a 4 weight on those streams just because occasionally you might find the bigger fish, or you might want to throw a heavier fly to get down in some of the deeper holes. So a lot of people will like 2 and 3 weights on small streams. I prefer the Superfine in the 4 weight just because it lets me throw some of the bigger flies and fight a bigger fish if I come across one. So my number 1 rod on the small side of the scale is my 7-foot 4 weight. Now then, moving up to my all-around kind of go-to rod is an 8-foot 6-inch 5 weight. This is the Orbis Recon 865, also a 4-piece. So again, a little bit bigger. You can see a 7-foot rod versus an 865. The tube's a little bit bigger. Still fits on my backpacks very well. Still fits in sleeves. Still easy to carry on a plane. But the 5 weight is kind of that all-around trout rod. It's gonna be not crazy overpowering on small trout, but it's also got enough stiffness to be able to fight and land bigger fish, 20 inches and so. So this is kind of that all-around fly rod. It's good for smaller bass flies, freshwater. kind of if I can choose one, it's usually a 5 or 6 weight. So then my last kind of go-to fly rod is my Helios 9-foot 8 weight. So this is also a 4-piece rod. It's a little longer. Tube's about the same, a little bigger diameter, bigger eyelets. But again, easy to travel with. And this 8-foot or 9-foot 8 weight is the kind of ultimate rod to me for a lot of different fish species. I've caught bass, I've caught pike, bonefish, permit, all in this same rod. So salmon, big trout, all in this 8 weight. So if you're traveling to places with big fish, this is the go-to rod. This is good for, again, casting in wind. One of the things with the weights too is if you're casting in wind a lot, you're gonna wanna up that line weight or up that rod weight a little bit, help you fight the wind. So now that we've sorted out rod weights and number of pieces, the last thing you'll see thrown around is the flex of the rod. You'll notice my 8 weight is a tip flex. There's a tip flex, there's mid flex, and there's full flex. But what does all that mean? What it means is basically how the rod works as a whole, how it engages. So full flex rods, just what they sound, are just what they sound like. It's that rod flexes pretty dramatically over the whole length of the rod, from the butt all the way to the tip. Mid flex rods have a lot of their flex kind of more in their mid section. They're kind of the neutral rod. And then tip flex rods put a lot of the power and flex in the tip of the rod. So why would you want one over the other? Well, a lot of it boils down to feel, the type of fly you're using, and just the cadence of your cast. So, which is why casting a fly rod is always important when shopping. But for me, I actually, of these 3 that I like, my 8 weight is a tip flex, my 5 weight is a mid flex, and my 4 weight's a full flex. So I'll actually adjust my casting style to each one as needed, but basically I like the tip flex on the 8 weight because I'm often casting into wind, so that little bit of extra power and oomph comes out of the end of the rod, helps you cut through that wind. Also, you're often casting, let's say it's a bonefish fly. It's a small fly, but often with a weighted head, a little heavier, so it helps get that fly to turn over on the line and fly better through the air. And then a mid flex, I like the versatility of it. If I'm nymphing, if I'm casting dries, or I'm casting streamers, I can adjust that rod and cast accordingly. And then with the full flex, it's just more fun on small fish. I'm usually casting a dry fly, so I really want that ultimate feel. So it's a great dry fly casting rod, and then when you hook a fish, even a little 6-inch, 8-inch brook trout, it's a lot of fun on a full flex lightweight rod. So when it comes down to your shopping and buying choices, ultimately, there's a lot of variables, including budget, how often you fished, all those priorities. For me, I like a made in USA rod. Orbis rods are made in Vermont, a 25-year unconditional guarantee. I can slam in a car door, my dog can jump through it, a fish can break it, it doesn't matter. I can get a replacement rod. So they stand behind it, they're excellent quality, excellent casting rods, and that's what I always encourage people to do, is there's fly rods at every weight, every category, at different budgets. Get out there, recognize your limitations, recognize what you want, what your priorities are, but cast the rod. Feel it in your hand. Get an understanding of what a quality rod is and what maybe lesser quality rods are, but then make your choices, make your shopping selection. So a good quality fly rod, you'll never regret it. It will enhance your fishing experience and help you have more fun on the water.